Thank you all for being here. For those of you that don't know, my name is Jess Preble, and I painted the body of work that you see around you in this room. This body of work is titled Salvage Title, in an allusion to the branding that happens to a vehicle's title when it sustains significant enough damage or harm done to be considered something that would actually affect its safety or its viability. But the nice thing about a salvage title is that is a type of title that actually enables the vehicle to return to service. So if you get into an accident and it gets totaled and then it gets rebuilt by a mechanic, it goes back into service, and at that point it has what's called a salvage title. I work on vehicles recreationally, as some of you may know, and over the past 6 or 7 years, I've spent time saving a lot of older vehicles that are considered totaled, that if they had honest title reporting, they would have salvage titles. They do not have honest title reporting, though. And to me, this body of work, and with my artist statement, the point I'm trying to get across is that there is no way to get through life without sustaining damage, emotionally, physically, psychologically, from existing, from your family, from loss, from losing people you love, people you care about, pets you care about. And my uncle has often said that he believes that when we're born, we have a finite amount of chutzpah, the life force that makes you wake up every day and feel joy and go into the world. And each misfortune chips away at that, and I disagree with him. I believe that each misfortune shapes who we are in this moment, and had we not been through every good thing and bad thing leading up to this moment now, we wouldn't be exactly who we are now, and I like who I am now. So, without wanting to be the lady that talks too much, this body of work is literally a representation of the stages of grief, and then punctuated by pieces that represent the labor and the care you must tend to the world outside you and around you, regardless of where you are in your process of grieving. I've noticed that a lot of artists in our community have talked about grief since COVID. I don't know if it's directly because of COVID, but we're all talking about grieving, and it's really lovely. And part of the reason why with this body of work and the artist statement, I don't ever mention any specific thing that happened to me. I started working on this about 6 years ago, and I was fortunate enough that Abigail Cruiser approached me and asked me if I wanted a show, and I said, that's fantastic, I've been painting one. So this is different than any other exhibition I've ever had, in that each of these images I took, and each of these images is from a real thing from my life. It's not a reference photo I searched online. It's not a stock photo, something from my life. So I'll start at this side of the room and work my way around. This is Acceptance, which is a 5-foot by 4-foot painting depicting a taxidermied Indian ornamental tarantula. My now husband gifted her to me when we first started dating, and I celebrated her and cared for her for 8 years, and then she died. And I wanted to do homage to her, so I taxidermied her, and now she's displayed on 22 karat gold in a dome glass frame at home. But it took 6 hours to put each pin to position her body, and yeah, so that piece is titled Acceptance, because metaphorically speaking, the amount of time it takes to focus on the task at hand that is processing through whatever miserable thing that has happened to you. That's how you get there eventually, or at least for me, that was how I accepted Shiva dying, literally. And then after she died, I took a bunch of images because I thought maybe I'd like to paint it. And I've noticed that in Western society, we often depict non-mammal creatures from a very mechanical and analytical ways. So when you see butterflies in a museum, or spiders, or amphibians, any species really that isn't a mammal, it's often flat, and you're looking straight down at it from the top, and it's been robbed of its sense of being a living creature. It becomes an ornament. And so when I photographed Shiva, I photographed her like I was taking a portrait of a real creature, not just an item or an object. So that's acceptance, and 59 pins. Next to it, working around the room, is 3 studies of a bed sheet. And the way that I got many of these reference photos is I actually will take a video and then pause the video and screenshot it. So I took a video of myself making my bed, like I do every day, and I screenshotted it multiple different times, and these pieces are all very similar, but just different enough. Much like every day, the task of making your bed or brushing your teeth or brushing your hair is very similar to the day before, but it's just different enough that I guess you know that time is still passing, is still moving forward. And people say that time is the great destroyer, and I don't think that's a negative thing. I think that it can erase and soften the edges of pain and grief. And so it's comforting in a way to make your bed every day, even if the sheet looks nearly identical each day and the bedspread looks nearly identical each day. You can take a small reassurance in knowing that another day has passed towards whatever it is you're suffering through, softening and becoming a memory rather than something you're experiencing in that moment. Over here, we have another iteration of acceptance. That is a painting of my best friend. She had done a ton of work for Denver University in hopes of getting a job post-finishing her PhD, and they took full advantage of all the work she did for them, putting together a beautiful artwork exhibition in collaboration with the criminal justice system here in town. And she was hoping then to move on to work with you. And on the opening night of the exhibition, they presented her with a lovely bouquet of flowers and a card saying, "We're going with another candidate." And so I told her, well, what you should do is burn it. We're sitting in the backyard. And so she did. And I took a video of her burning the card. And I paused the video and took this still. And her face really struck me because in that moment, she's simply accepting that sometimes things don't go quite the way you want them to. And in that image, she is so honest. And so I had to paint it. She studied briefly for her PhD in Paris, and at the time that the image was taken of her, Notre Dame was still burning. So that's why we have Notre Dame burning in the background. That's, we can go into that. But next to it is bargaining, and that is a cow skull, no, I'm sorry, a horse skull that my father gifted to me. And we're now estranged, and I stuff it with Christmas lights every year. I think the metaphor there is pretty obvious. Behind me is depression. This is a really fun one. Years ago, I was in a really dark place, and literally in the image and also metaphorically, and I woke up in the middle of the night to walk down the hallway to get a glass of water, and I saw myself at the end of the hallway reflected in the window on the door that's to the basement, and I'm like, wow, that would make a pretty good painting. I'm really sad. I went and got my phone and snapped a shot. A cool thing about this piece is that there's a variance in the glazing. A lot of people I know say that if you put a glass varnish on something, that it's much like putting it behind a pane of glass. And so to be mindful when finishing your works, because you may not want a pane of glass in between your viewer and your work. And so just the window is varnished with glass, and it's not because it's a pane of glass, but it's because when you're in that place, or at least when I'm in that place, there is this odd element of separation between you and even the real moment that you are in that moment. So this is Inger. There's a lot of really obvious illusions happening there. The blindfold, Inger is blinding, the eclipse, Inger is blinding. When I painted this piece, I was fortunate enough to be curating the final exhibition of the final remaining works of Bernard Earnest, who was a fairly well-known, nationally well-known artist who was an art instructor at Colorado College. And the works that remained were really the weird ones. They really were. They were dark, because before he was a professor for Colorado College, he was a artist documenting World War I on the battlefield. And so a lot of his works are, the ones that were left over were very dark, very sad, depicting cannibalism and war and burning cities and raping people, and really powerful stuff, although I understand why those weren't the ones collected by museums. It's kind of a hard side of humanity to sit with. Anyway, so Bernard Earnest, if he only painted the eyes of his subject matter if he knew the person, actually. So in all of his works, if the eyes are not painted, it's because he didn't actually know that person personally. And so I did not paint my eyes in this image for obvious reasons when you're in that place. And yeah. It's worth noting that there are only 2 pieces in the collection that actually have black paint in them, and it's this piece and then Denial at the end. All of the pieces that are in color, it's not actually black paint. It's Prussian blue, alizarin crimson, and raw umber. So next to it, this piece.
Yeah. Sorry, can I? Yeah. Because you said, for obvious reasons, you didn't paint. But it's you.
Correct.
So, but can you say more about that? Because that's so interesting. You just glossed over that like that. But that's
sure.
To not know your own self.
Sure. We've all been there.
Yeah, but I just say more.
When you're in that place, or when you're in this place, when you're in many of these places that are depicted, that are fraught with misfortune emotionally and psychologically, you don't know your own self, because when you're at that level of anger, you're certainly not the best version of yourself. And if you are, I would recommend therapy. But yeah, no, when I took that picture, because I wanted to do anger, I was not in a great place when I took that picture. And though I know I'm Jess every single day, that day, looking in a mirror, I would have told myself to be better. And I didn't. So I took a picture and I painted it. But yeah, I didn't know myself that day. I mean, I did, but like, the version of me that was there was not a good version.
It's not what we want.
Correct. Yeah. But it's, I mean, you have to. You can't avoid it. In Nichiren Buddhism, which is heavily practiced in Japan, there is a sacred document called the Gohonzon, and it is this beautiful text, and it says many, many more things than what I'm about to say, but one of the pieces that really stuck with me was that without that place, you simply would not be able to appreciate all the good places. So this next one is a depiction of my husband's cat, and I'm making the bed in this image. So this is another video I took lots of these videos, and then I paused them and tried to find the right light and the right composition, which was a lot easier said than done. And I'm making the bed. I am not in the frame because I'm not the subject matter. The task is the subject matter. So I'm making the bed. It's titled, "At Least You Made Your Bed Today." And something really interesting about this piece to me after the fact, and I don't know, and I hate to say I don't know if I did it intentionally, but I feel like I succeeded in making the negative space the subject matter. And I was really trying to put a pause button and freeze a moment where you're simply focused on the task at hand. You're in that room and the morning light is coming in through the window and you're making your bed and the cat jumps up on the bed and gets in the way and you have to pick up the cat and put the cat back down on the floor. And sometimes those simple tasks like the bed sheet, I'm not going to say it takes you somewhere good, but it stops the rambling of whatever it is that you're upset about just for a moment, and then you finish that task, and there's that tiny little feeling of, at least I did one thing right. If I do nothing else today or nothing else correctly today, at least I did one thing right. In this piece, I practice, well, in all the pieces, I do wet on wet blending with oil paint, so I take forever to do the sketches. The sketch for the spider took me 3.5 months just to do the sketch, because I don't use a projector, and I start with yellow paint, and then I go to orange paint, and then red paint, and then I really refine it with a super thin brush. So I kill myself in the sketch, and then when I paint, it's just like, it's kind of like annoying, because I don't even get to enjoy the painting part that much. So with this piece, I did a ton of wet on wet blending, and I had to work really, really quickly, and then I take this giant paintbrush and smear it all around, and I really tried to make the focal point just the very tip of the blanket down at the bottom. I hope I succeeded, but I wish I'd used a white blanket instead of a multicolored quilt. I regret that. The piece next to it is titled 1 to 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks without food, 3 days without water. And that is my front porch. And that is one of the many, so when I bought the house, there was just a gang of stray cats in the neighborhood and I started feeding them, and then I realized that no one else was and they didn't have shelter anywhere else. So I let them move into the workshop, and that's little Siamese kitty. And she shows up every morning and every night. And if I don't get out of bed or off the couch and go outside and feed her, nobody will. So it's kind of a sad title, kind of like a dark overtone on that piece, but it's not meant to be, because there's like a level of joy to be taken in the fact that even if you feel like you don't need yourself, you are actually much more needed than you think you are. And then next to it are 3 depictions of Hoya. They're just one of my house plants that's in my studio at home, with the morning light coming through the window. And it's a similar theme to the previous piece, which is simply that you must care for them if you don't want them to die. So even if you have lost your best friend or have become estranged from a family member or got fired from your job or your dog died, like, you still gotta go water the damn plants once a week, or you're not gonna have any plants. And there is like a certain element of peace and meditativeness in doing the plant chores, because even if I feel totally ishkabibbled and like if everything is just falling to nothing, if I do my plant chores, then that I accomplished something. I made the bed and I watered the plants. And then next to it is a piece titled Denial, and it is a nude woman who has not been eating well, and she's turned away from the camera and she's turned away from the vase next to it, and it's just, I feel kind of low-hanging fruit symbolism, but I still really enjoyed depicting it, just of how denial can be a lot of things. Like denial in the stages of grief is often spoken about as being denying that the event has happened, or like, I can't believe it happened, or why is this happening to me? And sometimes denial becomes like really cruel to yourself, where you're not just denying that something has happened, you're denying yourself from accepting it, from being angry about it. You're denying yourself comfort. You're punishing yourself in a way for something that maybe you did or didn't predicate, but it's not very productive. So you do have to go through it. So with this body, something really overarching, like a really overarching point that I tried to make is the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, many artists are talking about grief. And I don't believe that I am unique or special for having gone through the things that I went through to bring me to the place to create this body of work. And that's not me trying to be self-deprecating or demeaning to myself, but I think that a huge thing that we forget when we're going through the loss of a family member or a pet or a job or injury or surgery or anything, all the things, is that we're really not as alone as we think we are. Because everybody goes through those things. And it's so easy to be in any of these places and feel like you're the last man on earth and you're shouting into the void and not being heard. And there's so many people like you that are feeling the same thing. So before I take questions, I want to share a piece of poetry that my friend Jacqueline Moulton wrote that I feel when I read it after I painted this body of work, it really made sense. And I'm not a poet, so I don't think that any of my rambling today could sum it up as succinctly as this piece of poetry does. I too wanted to be a little less lonely, but today none of us got exactly what we wanted, which makes us right now in this moment a little more connected than we realized, and a little miracle of miracles, a little bit less lonely. Does anyone have any questions?